Let's start. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are here today to basically talk about COVID-19 and what it's doing to insurance claims really across the country. We're going to have two main focuses. The main focus for the first part of the video will be really the insurance component for business interruption claims and what's happening with that and what you need to do right here and right now to preserve your ability to dispute the claim, because we're seeing across the board, I think we've had in the last 2 days, at least 15 or 16 businesses reach out to us where they're getting either summarial denials, where they'll just inquire and be told by their insurance company, no, there is absolutely no way we're going to pay this, or they're getting memorandums sent out ahead of time saying your coverages aren't going to cover it, period. Just kind of blanket denials. And we don't think that's going to hold up very well. And we're going to go into a lot of details of why we think you need to preserve these claims regardless, and what we're going to have to do moving forward to try and enforce the policies you have in play. The second part of this, we'll talk a little about car accidents and other types of insurance claims that are already in effect right now, and what we're seeing insurance companies attempt to do to try and minimize their exposure and act in a way that I think I would consider bad faith. I think a few of us would consider it that as well. We have today 4 other attorneys other than myself. My name is Pearlman with the law firm of Denmon Pearlman. I'm going to go through and introduce everybody really quickly, just so we kind of have an idea of who's here. We have a husband and wife duo, Jim and KellyAnn Jenkins. They are the owners and managing partners of Jenkins Law. They are first-party superstars. That's really their main focus for their firm. They do some other things as well, but it's really these first-party claims such as insurance, homeowners policies, things of that nature, where the insurance companies themselves are not honoring claims or minimizing what their exposure would be. Jim and KellyAnn for years now have been fighting those. In fact, I hired them to represent me when I had to go after my homeowners policy. They're phenomenal lawyers, shockingly, really knowledgeable about a subject, and we're all very happy about that. So he's going to talk a lot about that today. I think KellyAnn is going to talk about the defense side of this. She was an insurance defense attorney in the beginning of her career, so she has a very good knowledge of exactly how, what, when, where, and why insurance companies, their strategies that they employ to try and minimize or screw you. We also have Mel Sams today. Mel Sams is an accountant extraordinaire, one of the best I've ever met. I've used him numerous times as an expert witness because he's smarter than I am, and he understands numbers and he understands the tax structure better than really anybody that I know. And I wanted him to be able to come in and talk today and answer questions in regards to here's what we're doing and here's why we're building up these QuickBook, record keeping components of your businesses. And we want to really make sure that the insurance companies understand what the value of your claim is and how to do that, how to really preserve it. And he'll probably talk some strategic approaches as well to try and make sure that you do everything you can to make sure that you preserve your claim. Last and least, my hetero life partner in business and pleasure, Chris Denmon. Chris is my partner. We are both together at the law firm of Denmon Pearlman. Chris is going to talk, I think, really about the bigger philosophical approaches here, such as what the government has done in the past, in particular, when you look at comparisons. We're going to argue there's some BP claim similarities that we think are going to occur here. And we're also going to talk about the September 11th fund, things of that nature, where government, we know right here, right now, is stepping in. We have already seen some of it. I think Chris is going to approach some of that. He understands, I think, the history of these types of claims and what goes from there. And then we're all going to try and answer your questions the best we can. But right here, right now, I kind of want to approach this in a linear fashion, which is, when we're talking about these business interruption claims, business stoppage claims, what are the first things we need to do when we're a small business owner? I'm also a small business owner. I own a kids gym called Romp and Roll in St. Pete, and I understand the dynamics really of having a small business that has to be shut down, period. So I think I want to pass it to Jim first. Can you kind of walk us through what you anticipate really you need to really do initially to preserve these claims?
Sure thing. And before we jump into what necessarily you actually have to compile as a business owner, because that's why Mel is on here, he'll be able to tell you the specifics about your finances, which if you do not have a good accountant already, you need to make sure you have someone to produce documents such as profit and loss ledgers for the past 3 years, tax returns, payrolls, anything to show that your business was on track 2017, 2018, 2019, and that there was some event that triggered a decline in your business, and it wasn't due to the real estate market, it wasn't due to a failed marketing campaign, but that it was due to something that will trigger your commercial policy. So in short, the first thing that you need to do right now is get a hold of your insurance policy. I can tell you, Lee can tell you, Chris can tell you, KellyAnn can tell you, most people do not know what kind of coverage it is that they have, whether it's for their home, their car, if you're a business owner, what kind of liability in case someone slips and falls, or in the event that there is a worldwide pandemic and you have to be shut down due to civil authority, do you have coverage for that? So the first step and any kind of analysis is locate your insurance policy. If you don't have it, contact your insurance agent today. That is something they should have on their computer. They can email it to you. And when you get your insurance policy, one thing that I've encountered over the past week is that most people don't realize that for the commercial policies, there's standard language. It's 150 pages with certain definitions and certain descriptions of things. But then most importantly, especially right now, there are going to be riders, addendums, exclusions. So for example, I was looking at a policy yesterday from Zurich for a company that owns several hotels in Florida. And there's standard commercial policy, what we cover, what we don't cover. And then you get to the appendix. And the appendix says special rules for Florida, special rules for virus, special rules for this and that. So the first thing is get a copy of your policy. In addition to getting a copy of your policy, the other thing you need to do is make sure that you can track down any business records that you have to date to show what your actual loss of income is going to be. Because when you submit a claim to the insurance company, like I already had one client do, he stated, well, I lost business. The insurance company already denied it because not necessarily saying it should be covered or not, but he didn't put the amount in controversy. It's like if you get into a car accident and you walk out and say, I'm not hurt. Lee, Chris, myself, KellyAnn, no one can help you. You have to actually document and show what is the amount that's more than zero. Now, it makes more sense that commonly we would know, hey, well, I lost some business, but you have to be able to quantify that. So if you haven't already, if you are a small business owner and you can go into QuickBooks, run a report for 2019. If you've applied for the PPP loan, some of those documents that you were already required to get to show what your payroll was, what your profits, those kind of things, compile all those documents and have those ready, because the third thing you're not going to have to do is once you have your policy and you have the financial documents to support that you have lost income, or you have lost produce if you're a restaurant, or you have lost that big marketing meeting you were going to host if you're a hotel, or you lost that convention or whatever it may be, is then you actually have to submit the claim.
Jim, let me stop you right there. Mel, can you step in here? I mean, you're the accountant, you probably work with more.
Yeah. And Lee, and before you go into that, because that's important, because Jim touched on getting your policy, do call your broker. Call your broker and say, hey, you can ask your broker, do I have business interruption insurance? Do I have business loss income insurance? And can you please send me a copy of my policy? So do that. Do not listen to your broker when your broker will probably tell you, yeah, you have the coverage, but it's not going to apply here, or you're excluded. Don't listen to any of that. They don't really know.
That's correct.
So ignore them on that. Your job is to get the policy. Make sure you have the coverage. Ask them over the phone. 2, have them email you the policy.
Yeah, get the policy. Always get the policy if you don't have it. Mel, you want to jump in as the accountant here, and because Chris made a great point there. As far as, your brokers, they're all going to say no. They're designed to keep the money in.
Absolutely.
But as far as showing the money loss, like what I've been advising people to do when they've called me is send in a 3-year profit and loss. Okay. Send that in to show the insurance company right off the bat when you make your claim. Hey man, this is what I'm making. I'm now making nothing or at a greatly reduced rate because of the stoppage. Preserve that claim well. Mel, will you tell me what you think you would need to do?
Absolutely. And those of us that have been around the Gulf Coast in recent years have a pretty good roadmap from the BP oil spill settlement, which occurred almost exactly 10 years ago Monday. one of the things that we on the Gulf Coast had working for us in that event was we did a 5-year look back. And what I would advise small business owners to do is go into your QuickBooks, go into your Xero, whatever accounting software you use, run a 3-year profit and loss, but run it by month. And we're really mainly concerned with gross income here, because giving BP as the roadmap, it wasn't the net profit that was the driver, it was the gross income. And we were showing that the event that occurred in the Gulf immediately impacted business owners' ability to bring money in the door. It wasn't so much what you did with it when you got it. So that month over month for the last 3 years, gross income's critical. And if you're looking for a specific date range, I would want to see everything from February 1 of 2017 through February 31, 2020, because the disasters are declared to have happened on February 15th. So we're looking at how your gross income was trending. And I would suspect many people, 17, 18, 19, it's going up, up, up. And then suddenly we take a major dive. And that's going to work.
When I'm looking at these policies, I'm seeing net income as the language that's in the policy. What's the difference between gross income, net income, and what you were just mentioning, net profit? Because I think that's key here.
Great question, Chris. And those are 3 different measures. Your gross income is what you collected, what you billed, depending on what method of accounting we're using here. Again, looking back at BP, they wanted to see everything on accrual accounting, which definitely adds some complexity. And again, like Jim said, you got to make sure your accountant's on board, has all this stuff tightened up for you. But basically, gross income is what you billed or what you brought in, depending on which method of accounting we're looking at. Your net income is going to be the gross minus your cost of goods sold and any overhead or operating expenses that you have. Net profit is more akin to EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which is an even deeper measure of profitability. So again, I think 3-step process. Let's make sure we have the gross dialed in. Let's make sure your books are caught up, period. If they're not, you need to get them that way quickly and accurately. Step 2 is going to be normalizing the financials. What does it really cost to run my business every month? Yeah, I may have had some extraordinary repair or some extraordinary item. We want to be able to back that out and show what it normally takes to run the business. That gets us that net income. And then the EBITDA, again, is an even deeper measure of that.
Right. So it sounds like, so what we're doing is we're asking, it's part of this claim, we're going to be looking for our clients to get recouped, not just for what the business owner may have gotten in profit, but what the business, we want to kind of try to anticipate what the business would have made, but for this happening. And
right.
That's where you come into play, Mel. And that's the
exactly. And the numbers are going to be very favorable. I know a lot of my small business clients, you can look at 2017, 18, 19, they were on a straight up rise. And then it just, I had so many people come to me and say, hey, Mel, December was a record month. January was a record month. February was on track to be a record month. And then suddenly 0, which is what's going to amplify these claims.
Absolutely. So Mel, it sounds to me a lot like, or a little bit at least, the extrapolation here is going to be really important. Okay. Now, my question to you is this: the extrapolation of what we think could have occurred here, as Chris was pointing out, as you were explaining the detail of, is fundamental. To make the claim initially, do you think you would need to have that extrapolation done? I don't know the answer to this.
No, to do the initial claim, that's where I want to see the gross income by month, just to see, hey, which way are we trending?
Understood.
Let me jump in on that
Please.
one. Okay, so this is very similar to where we have helped a lot of homeowners in the wake of either pipe burst, roof, all the way to a Category 5 hurricane, about what it is to basically have the threshold of having the policy play into effect, and then ultimately what are the damages you would have to prove should you not settle if you need to go to trial. So in order to show that the policy is actually in play, you need to at least have some kind of record that you lost some money. Because if you are a business that you've been operating day to day and you didn't have any decrease whatsoever, you don't have a claim. So I don't think that you necessarily need to employ the services of a forensic accountant, which is what Mel would be an expert at doing, until you get the other side to agree, this being the insurance company, that it is a covered claim. What I'm seeing right now is that people are saying no. In fact, I had a client within 2 minutes, a client who has coverage for viruses because he owns a veterinary clinic, who was told within 2 minutes, without no proper investigation whatsoever, your claim is not covered because there was no structural damage. So in that case, I don't need 3 years of profit and loss. They're pretty much acting in bad faith. All I need to say is, well, is $1 covered? Because you're saying that it's not covered, and the legal recourse is for me to go to a judge in what's called a declaratory action and say, Judge, is that covered? Because he bought that coverage.
Well, Jim, let me stop because we're going to go into that in depth in a little bit. Right here, right now, I don't want to jump too far off of the main point initially of what do we need to get into, because you're bringing up great points, and that's going to go, I think, more towards what happens upon the denial. But really, so right here, right now, anybody chime in on this. Let's just wrap up the initial component of this let's just get something out. Again, what I've been telling my clients to do, get a 3-year profit and loss together. We're talking the gross kind of income that Mel has been discussing. Get a date the county ordinance shuts down your county, okay, whether it's the statewide Safer at Home or a county Safer at Home. Provide that, and then even a brief narrative, a paragraph or a page of here's what I do, here's what's happening. Because my whole point right here, right now is do a good preservation of your claim on your insurance policy, right? Because I don't want you to just send, hey, I want my policy with nothing to validate it. Because if this ends up in litigation, if we are fighting this down the road, I don't want the insurance company to have an out saying, oh, we had no idea, it wasn't a good claim. Does that sound right to KellyAnn, Jim?
Yes, yeah, and I'll let KellyAnn chime in on what the defense side would be, but that's one of the things I've been encouraging my clients is that I had a client who owned a clothing store in Lakeland, just called and said, I lost income. That's not going to fly. We're going to work on preserving that, because one of the defenses, and it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't approach by the insurance defense, which I'll let KellyAnn come in and talk about, is that if you report it too soon, the insurance company's going to say, oh, well, it's too soon, we can't look into it. And then if you report it not timely enough, then they're going to say, well, we were prejudiced, I wish you would have told us. And it's this whole, under the policy, what they call pre-loss conditions. So you got to tell them enough, but if you show them everything too soon, then they're going to say, oh, well, we're going to find a technicality, now it's not covered. Or if you give them a little bit of information, they'll say, well, it's not covered because you didn't give us enough. So KellyAnn, I'll let you chime in on how, when the insurance company actually gets the claim, because without a claim number, unless you let them know, all this conversation's for nothing. So you have to at least have a documented claim where it says, on Sunday, April, whatever date, I called my insurance agent and they assigned me claim number 123, this adjuster. That's what kicks off the ball, is to see if whether or not you even get coverage to begin with.
Yeah, so I'll kind of jump in there. I think one of the things that's going to be interesting is, like Jim pointed out, is when do you make this claim? Because if you make the claim too early, you're not going to have any evidence of your lost income. You're not going to have any evidence of the loss of revenue to your business. We don't know how long this is going to go on. That loss in revenue could continue to creep up and up and up for the next month, the next 2 months, the next year. We don't really know. But what's going to happen is, if you don't make the claim right away, that insurance company is going to say, you had a duty to report it timely under the policy and you failed to do that. You have to understand from the insurance perspective that insurance companies are businesses. Their job is to make money. That's why they're here. That's why they exist. They'll tell you it's to protect you, and sometimes they do, but their overall goal is to make money. Some of these companies, we're talking about having net incomes in the billions of dollars, and so they're going to want to protect their money, especially in a time when businesses are hurt. They're not going to want to be paying out claims. These insurance companies will do anything they can to hold on to the cash, and especially in a situation where we see things are so up in the air right now, they're going to try and delay the claims. First, they're going to deny them. Then they're going to try and delay them. I think you can anticipate that even after making a claim, if it's not denied right away, if they do give you some sort of lowball settlement, or if it does have to eventually go into a lawsuit, which I'm sure we'll talk about in detail a little later, I think you can expect that the insurance companies will do everything in their power to make these lawsuits drag on and on and on. They're going to want the policyholders to settle for a low amount and get frustrated. The other thing I think the insurance companies are hoping that maybe there will be some sort of case law that comes out that's favorable to them. So they're just going to try and sit on some of these and, again, just keep delaying them. You'll see them probably lobbying pretty hard like they usually do to get laws in their favor. Anything that can give them an upper hand and kind of slow the process to pay these claims. So it is going to be a fight. It is going to be a long process. So I think one of the things we've been telling business owners, get everything together now, but expect this to be a process and expect to be in for the long haul.
Mel, I want to jump to you. Then Chris, I'm going to come to you after that. Mel, right here, right now, we've talked about just getting that gross out and getting that information available. If they've got an accountant, great. If they don't, they need to reach out to one, maybe you, because you're actually really good at this. But like KellyAnn just talked about, this potentially, because of the strategies the insurance companies will employ, will take time. What do they need to do right now from an accounting perspective to get everything in play? Because as we said, they're not going to deny it outright, or if they do agree there's some coverage here, it's going to be a lowball offer. Shocking. Right. Tell the average person, what do they need to do here now to protect themselves with their records?
Definitely. I think a lot of us have been put through the motions here lately on the Paycheck Protection Program and assembling, and the EIDL program and assembling the paperwork.
Just real quick, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, what's going on with that right now?
Great question, Lee, very timely. So as of right now, the Small Business Administration has reached its maximum capacity of $349 billion for this program. Now, let me just tell you this. Myself included, probably a lot of us on this conference, as well as a lot of people listening, let me guess, you applied at the very beginning, you haven't heard anything from your bank, you haven't gotten any emails, you don't know what's going on, your banker's giving you kind of elusive answers. I know I hear that a lot. And I can tell you right now that the critical point here is that in your application process, did you obtain an E-Tran number from the SBA or not? If you've got one of those, that means, to me, your claim is being processed to the point of funding. You'll receive an amortization schedule, you'll sign it, and then you'll be funded. Now, the program is being heavily debated right now to replenish with another, I've heard, $250 billion. Basically, the shocking stat there was that the SBA basically did 14 years worth of normal lending in 14 days. So, I mean, that's just mind blowing. This whole thing has just been total chaos. And my advice on that would be, if you've got your application in, great, find out from your banker if you've got that E-Tran number. If you don't, and a lot of people didn't get in, we yet don't know where the kind of cutoff point was. That's what everyone's trying to figure out, is at what point, what hour, what day did the money officially dry up? That's being figured out. So if you have that number, great. If you don't, I say don't give up, don't stop, because there will likely be a round two, and you want to be in line for that. So,
well, Mel, correct me if I'm wrong real quick. They paid out basically like what, 1.6 million loan applications on 20 some million, and they're basically just going to put another 250 billion in. So we're looking at maybe another 1.5, 1.6 million companies that maybe get funding. Is that fair to say?
That's a fair statement. And as you're already starting to hear a lot of cases of, potential unfairness, for lack of a better word. Like the big one in the news is Ruth's Chris Steakhouse got 20 million. Well, they did it because the law said you cannot have more than 500 employees, but then thank the restaurant industry and their strong lobby, at any location got added on the tail end of that. So all the big franchises, all the big chains, they're primed for this. And I mean, I don't know if it's true that they got the money and never even had to apply. I mean, who knows? It's hard to say, but that makes it even more important to have your docs in order and get it in. Don't be discouraged. Get it in there. So.
Okay. Chris, I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Just one other thought, though, on the computations here, something that, again, I'm thinking back to the years of handling a lot of BP claims and doing the damage calcs on that. One of the critical things, especially for hospitality businesses, hotels, restaurants, you're very seasonal, especially here in Florida and on the Gulf Coast. and probably all over the country for that matter, you were hitting your peak season with snowbirds, with people from up north, people from the Midwest who come down here. That's why that month over month is so critical for those seasonal businesses. And even think up north where you've got snow and a lot of businesses slow down in the winter but start to pick up in the spring. We're going to want to show that seasonality. That's going to, again, help bolster the damages here. So an annual profit and loss is not going to tell that story. That's why I like to see the month.
That makes great sense. Chris, I kind of want to jump into your expertise on this as far as what kind of businesses in the area, do you see having really the most exposure at this point? Mel touched on it a little bit. You want to give us a recap, like what locally, we're in the Tampa Bay area. What locally are we going to be looking at? What kind of businesses do you think really need to focus on this, or anything else that you think is relevant to the topic we're on right now?
Yeah, and so it's businesses that we haven't even thought of. I mean, it's Leah, you and I are hearing from people. I mean, you name it, any sort of franchise, any sort of business that caters to children, any sort of business like your business, Lee. How about we talked about the guy with the rest, with the martial arts studio. All hotels are getting decimated right now. And when, I live out in Madeira Beach, and you go up and down the beaches, and there are so many small little hotels. And, these are not gigantic chains that are able to go ahead and live for tomorrow and survive. And these are small local businesses, restaurants. And I mean, those are the obvious ones, right? Auto dealerships, car sales are down. I mean, you just go down the road, because no one else is on the road, drive down the road and look at all the small businesses, and you can see it. Think about where your kids would normally go. Whether it's the gymnastics studio, right? I mean, all of these businesses are just losing all of their revenue. And some people have the ability, some of us consumers have the ability, if we're paying on a subscription model, maybe for my daughter's gymnastics studio, some of us can continue to pay, at least for now, but a lot of people can't, and a lot of people have to stop it. So, I mean, it's everywhere. It's hitting everyone, and we don't know when things are going to get back to normal. And to Mel's point, we're looking at what, 27 million small businesses in the United States right now. And we may be able to get some government funding to cover 3 million. Maybe right now it's 1.5, right? So how many millions of businesses are going to get left out in the cold? That's why what we're doing here is so important. That's why we're having this conversation, because you're looking at small businesses, we're talking to people every day. It's crazy, right? Like, you buy your insurance 5 years ago, you talk to your broker and he says, hey, let me sell you some business interruption insurance. And you think, well, that sounds like a great idea. If my business gets interrupted because some tragedy happens or some crisis hits, that sounds great. So let me pay you monthly, month after month, year after year, so that I have this there. And then COVID hits, people have crisis. Some people for the first time ever are making insurance claims and they're getting flat denied. And why? And the insurance company's coming back and saying, well, listen, on page 20, paragraph C, there's an exclusion that may apply to you, or our definition of property damage is different than yours. Or, here's a link to your policy. Go figure it out for yourselves. And we're seeing policies that are, some are 20, 25, 30 pages, some are 600 pages. So that's why we're having this conversation today. Like, insurance companies are absolutely going to deny claims. That's what they're doing. These businesses need it. And they need the insurance company to step up at a time when they need it most. And of course, insurance companies are not going to. Like KellyAnn said, deny, right? Defend, right? Delay. That's what they do. There's a reason there's, half the Super Bowl commercials, I hope they have a Super Bowl next year, but half the Super Bowl commercials are insurance companies. They're lizards and generals and good neighbors and all that stuff. They spend a lot of money when they're trying to get your business, but they spend even more money trying to deny your claims.
State Farm made between 5 and 8 billion profit over the last 2 years, net profit. Chris, that's actually a great point. I want to kind of jump. You went into, hey, you're excluded under paragraph, blah, 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 right? It's under the pollutants clause. Jim and KellyAnn, can you jump in on this a little bit? Explain to us, what is this virus clause component, the exclusion, the inclusion? Can you walk me through that a little bit as far as what actually exists?
Right. And Chris, what you just talked about, when the average person goes and they say their agent sells them this business interruption coverage, which from the low business level up to the president of the United States last week saying, hey, if I have it, it should be covered, right? Do the fair thing. But a lot of people don't know what their policy actually says. And a lot of the brokers who sold those policies don't know what it really says. And that's kind of where the whole getting your documents together to be set up, to be positioned correctly, segues into what KellyAnn, myself, and other attorneys can do to help these people when basically the rubber hits the road. So I just think it's important that what people need to realize, or may not know, is that having a virus out there that can impact business, this isn't the first time this has happened. And one of the things that I've seen, and you guys may have seen in other insurance policies with auto accidents and the way society works, is that when something happens and an insurance company is about to lose some money, or industry-wide, they get together and say, we're not covering that anymore. So a lot of the research I've been doing, let's just go back about, 14 years ago, 2006, swine flu. Swine flu hit the United States, hit the world actually. And I remember I was in law school, and I also remember people talking about this SARS in Japan, I think 2001, 2002, which is all kind of related to what's going on now. And after the 2006 swine flu, that's when a lot of these commercial policies started excluding viruses. Before then, if you look at the policies, that wasn't in there. Again, the world happens, insurance companies say, how do we mitigate our risk? How do we take as much in while paying out as little as possible? So post 2006, there are policies that now provide coverage for virus exclusion or provide coverage for business interruption due to what's called civil authority. And I believe that is where the biggest argument is going to be, because under the civil authority part of most of these policies, and again, every policy is different. You need to make sure you have the complete policy so an attorney can sit down and go over it. But what's key about civil authority is that civil authority contracts, or the language says, if there is an act of civil authority, we will pay you for the business interruption. But the civil authority is only into play if there is what's called a covered damage or direct physical loss to the property. Now, what does that mean? In the sense of a hurricane, it's pretty simple. Hurricane comes through, blows the roof off your restaurant, you're closed down, boom, direct physical loss to the structure, you make the claim. But what's going to become the Wild West, and why there's a lot of, again, there's going to be a lot of litigation going forward, which is why it's important to preserve all your records now, is there are courts that have said direct physical loss isn't necessarily structural loss. Direct physical loss, because loss is not necessarily defined in the policy. And it goes back to the first day of contracts in law school. If there's ambiguity in the contract, tie goes to the runner. It doesn't go to the person who paid for the policy. It goes to the person who wrote the policy. And courts generally hold that, hey, they're going to err on the side of the policy holder if they gave you money, insurance company, and you wrote the policy. So the issue is going to become.
Wait, Jim, I'm sorry, reiterate that for me. I might have gotten a little muddy in there. I want to make sure that's clear.
So courts have generally held that where there is ambiguity in an insurance policy, to err on the side of the person who is the policy holder. So the definition of loss, a lot of policies don't have that defined. So for example, I have a client who was summarily denied their claim within 2 minutes because they said the insurance company told my client there was no structural damage, therefore no direct physical loss. Well, direct physical loss is not necessarily that your building got destroyed. There is some case law out there that says no, loss, if not defined in the policy specifically to say structural loss, could include loss of income, loss of business. And if there's an ambiguity on what a definition of a word is, the courts say, well, look, we're going to side on the behalf of the policyholder, because me as a policyholder,
the person who paid for the policy.
Yeah, I didn't write the contract. I paid for it. So you know what? If you wanted to properly exclude something, you should have defined it. You should have put in SARS. You should have put in coronavirus. And some policies are going to say we specifically exclude this, but other policies say, no, we cover virus. So what's interesting is I have a client who specifically has coverage for viruses denied. And there's some big cases going on right now, specifically out on the West Coast and in New Orleans, 2 restaurant owners who have business interruption coverage, who paid extra money for virus coverage, and their claim was denied because they said, well, there was no structural loss. Now, interestingly enough, what happens if I own a business that caters to children like Romp and Roll, and I have to come in and pay a mitigation company to clean everything down?
I'm not paying you for mentioning my company. I just want you to know that. Keep going though.
Of course not. But, or a restaurant, but if someone walks into my establishment and potentially has coronavirus, and as a result, I have to now clean everything or replace certain things in my business, is that not a direct physical loss? And there's case law out there that seems to suggest, and what's interesting is that when an insurance company denies a claim within 2 minutes, my first question is, well, are you a judge? You didn't write the policy, desk adjuster. You're committing bad faith, because I don't care the nature of my claim. You have an obligation to, in good faith, at least investigate it longer than 2 minutes, to look at my books, to sit there and say, oh, well, maybe there is some kind of exclusion. So what's going to be litigated in the courtrooms is if you can say that coronavirus, not necessarily the virus, but the government's reaction caused a loss, meaning they put a sign on your door, or as they did down in Key West and in Broward County, where specifically, and this is important because this has happened on March 22nd. I think this is a sign of things to come, where the Broward County goes to a business and says, the emergency order is necessary because of the propensity of the virus to spread person to person, and also because, and here's the key language, the virus is physically causing property damage due to its proclivity to attach to surfaces. My argument is you just open the door to the policy, because if the government says it's covered, but you, insurance agent on the phone, says it's not, and my business is losing money and I paid for that coverage, I think we have a problem. Similar to what I had on a hurricane claim, where I had a hurricane claim in Panama City, where the insurance company said, oh, we can repair that house, but I had a letter from the government saying my property is condemned, or my client's property is condemned. So we held them up. Guess what happened? They ended up paying out policy limits.
Let me stop you, Jim, because I think that's a really, really important point here. And so what you basically just did as a kind of recap is you're talking about the fact that this virus could, because of its inherent nature, be argued as a physical damage to the building. I mean, we've seen the studies where the virus can live, for 4 or 5 hours in the air, right? Which is why it's been so viral and so hard to contain. KellyAnn, let me jump to you on this, because Jim's been talking for a bit, but frankly, Jim, I'm so impressed with you right now. I've never been this impressed with you. That's so much good information. KellyAnn, from the insurance company perspective, okay, what do you think the approach for the small business owner? We know what they're going to do. What do you think the insurance company is going to try and do to delay? We've kind of talked about strategically, legally, what we think we should do. What should the small business owner, the average person dealing with this, what do you think the insurance company is going to tell that person, and how should they respond to that when we're talking about, look, this virus is physical. It is causing physical damage.
So I think the first thing you're going to see is just like Jim mentioned, outright denials. They're not even going to investigate it. They're just going to say, no physical loss, it's out. The other thing I think we're going to see is that they're going to give maybe small settlements, but I don't anticipate that for a while. I think we're going to see just a lot of flat out denials.
Should the average person say absolutely not? Like if they call and they say, hey, yeah, we're going to cover you and here's what you get. I mean, are you advising them wait and talk to a lawyer first? Or, I mean, my concern is people are going to say, oh, well, that's all I'm going to get. Obviously I think we're on the same page. You tell me what they should do.
Yeah. If the insurance company comes in and says, oh, hey, this is all that's covered, definitely get another opinion, go talk to a lawyer. Like we talked about earlier, I think what's really important is getting your policy now, have a lawyer look at it. I don't know if many of you have ever taken a look at your insurance policies, but those things are so incredibly difficult to read and understand, and that's intentionally so. These insurance companies intentionally draft their policies so that it doesn't make sense, so that you're going to be sitting there reading it, not having a clue, and you need to get it to an attorney who handles insurance policies and who reviews them on a daily basis. I think that's a first step to say, okay, yes, you do have this coverage. Let's see what we can do. But what I would say is, if they give you some money, send it over to an attorney, because like we mentioned earlier, I expect that you don't know what the amount of your loss is going to be at this point in time.
At the very least, don't cash the check, right?
I would disagree with you, Lee.
Okay.
I was going to let Jim jump in on that. We have some experience on this.
So 90% of my homeowner claims are cases where they opened up coverage, like in the case I helped you on, Lee. And I'm only mentioning that because you said it earlier, so I don't want to violate.
You did a great job. I was very happy.
Yeah, attorney-client privilege, but
Waived.
yeah, waived forever for Facebook. But what happens is, if they send you a check, because that's what they'll do, is they may just send you a check and they don't send you a release, you cash that check, and then we go after it for more, and then I employ Mel as my expert. 90% of my hurricane claims, they give out a check because it's covered. There's no way you can't say that your roof blew off or there was damage, that it's not covered. And what'll happen is people will sit there, and that's a game the insurance company plays, is they'll get a little bit of money, and then half the people don't even think to challenge it. They don't say, well, maybe I should talk to someone. Maybe I should go to my accountant and say, well, this number doesn't seem right. And what I call it is basically a nuisance value on a claim. On a homeowner's claim, insurance companies, even if they do not agree with you, always offer you $2,500, because they got mathematicians and people that sit there and say, oh, if we offer $2,500 on every claim and settle, we'll make record-breaking profits. So what happens is, you got to make the claim is that if they flat out deny you, great. All I have to show under Florida law is $1, and then whenever I get you $1 or more, they pay me separately.
So you said that in a way that we understand as lawyers.
Okay.
Can you break that down a little more simplistically? And then let me give a guidepost for this. I want to jump to Mel, because you mentioned, hey, I need to hire an accountant as an expert. I want to have him talk about what that means and what he would do in that scenario and how it would relate to this COVID-19 component. And then Chris, I want to jump to you on bigger picture. I want to look at comparisons between BP, between the September 11th funds, things like that. So just kind of giving a guidepost, and then we'll try and get some questions. I do have one question. We'll talk about this afterwards, which is, what's the percentage a law firm would charge to handle cases like this? But we'll come to that at the conclusion, because that's a great question. I would want to know too.
And Lee, can I just, before
yes,
we
please.
back to Jim, I noticed he brought up a really important point that he kind of brushed over. Like, it is okay to cash the check, but do not sign a release or any documents without having someone review it. For people who aren't really familiar with insurance claim, a release is essentially a document that's going to come from the insurance companies stating that if you accept this money, you are releasing all claims against them. It could be pretty vague or it could be specific, so you definitely do not sign anything.
Yeah. And then we'll come back. We're going to cover bad faith. I think that'll kind of, after Chris talks about big picture and what we are anticipating the future as far as legislation and things of that going, the direction it's going to go. I do want to talk about bad faith and what that means and what it would mean for the case. But let's jump to Mel, because I don't want to go too far off where we're at right now. Talk to us about what you would do as an expert in these scenarios and how you would really help, the small business owner. What would be required of you? What would you need from them to be an expert?
Absolutely. And Lee, you asked me a really great question earlier. I want to touch on that briefly before I answer that. You asked me a great question, which is, what should a small business be doing right now to get ready for this? And I think we jumped over to PPP and started talking about that. So let me go back and answer.
Yeah,
that's all right. It's all good. You're doing a great job.
I'm a terrible moderator. Stop it. Go on.
No, that's all right. But let me answer that. The best thing as a practical matter you can do right now is reach out to your accountant, your bookkeeper, your internal accounting staff, your controller, whomever keeps your books for your business, or maybe it's you yourself. Reach out to that person and just say, hey, I just want to make sure we're current on everything. I don't want to get any surprises when we go to strike while the iron's hot here and you find out that your books are a year behind. Because then we're going to be racing to try and get that caught up, and mistakes could happen. So just as a practical matter, find out where you are in that process. If they're not at least through January 31 of 2020, let's get them there. And and if they're up through March 31, even better. So that's practical matter number one that I think we can do. Now, what I'm going to do again is I'm going to look at the trend over the last at least 3 years. Again, BP looked at a 5-year run up. I don't know what the standard's going to become here, but we're going to start with 3. And I think 90% of the businesses in America probably are going to tell a similar tale, where the storyline is that, 10 years ago, we're coming out of the Great Recession. We're getting better. Things are looking good. 17, 18, 19, things are on the upswing. Economy's great. Unemployment's super low. And then all of a sudden this happens. And now we're into depression level numbers, basically overnight. So we're going to paint that picture, because again, that's going to show that had this not ever happened, had COVID-19 and had the government shutdown, lockdown not occurred, you would have been doing fine and still having record numbers. That's the storyline here. But that because of that event, you couldn't, and it was beyond your control.
Mel, what if you don't have 5 years? What if you don't have 3 years? What if you're a new business?
So great question. So if you're a new business, that's okay. Again, going back to BP, there was a provision to where you didn't just have to have 3 or 5 years of history to qualify or to be able to show you had damages. If you're a brand new business, I think here, and again, lawyers, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the critical point is, was I officially up and running for business on February 15th, 2020, when all this went down? I remember, again, going back to BP again, BP had hired Price Waterhouse, second largest professional services company in the world, to do all of their analysis on these claims. And what PW was trying to show was that, no, you did not, they picked these things apart. I mean, they went through this with a fine tooth comb. And I know we went to battle against their numbers just time and time again, because they were trying everything they could to show that, or to chip away at the fact that BP hurts your business. They were looking for every little crack that they could find to get into. And, so again, having those good numbers is going to be critical.
And that's going to happen here.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, there's billions of dollars that are going to be at stake here.
Yep.
It won't cut into their profits too much, but
no. Well, like you said, and let me just say this too as an aside, to what Chris was saying. I called my insurance agent, and he's probably listening to this. And Mike, I love you, bro. You're a great dude. But I called my insurance agent, 6 weeks ago, and I said, "Hey, you remember that business interruption I bought a couple years ago?" And he said, "All right, I'm going to stop you right there." He goes, "It doesn't count here. You didn't have a viral rider. You didn't have this. You didn't have that." He said to me, which again, not to fuel the fire, but he said, "Well, if this turns out to be an act of terrorism, there could be something you may be able to do, but probably not." I mean, that was what he told me. He discouraged me. He just told me right away I wouldn't qualify.
Cool. What's interesting about that, and what I realized is that I've been studying a lot of this, and is that it depends. I mean, what's interesting is that there's case law. I'm looking at it right now where it says that, well, if you weren't impacted individually, but you're a restaurant and the meat packaging facility in South Dakota got shut down, like in the news, and they deliver to you, that's covered. If you're a business and a business within a mile radius of yours shut down, that's covered. And it's a case-by-case scenario. And ultimately, a lot of the language in these policies is they didn't define. And again, it goes back, the argument to the judge, if this gets that far, is going to be very similar to what I was telling Lee yesterday, which is, living here in Florida, the perfect example. Category 5 hurricane comes to the state of Florida. The governor, like Rick Scott did in 2017, states there was a state of emergency. You have to evacuate. You evacuate. You shut your business down. You come back 7 days later, your building, thankfully, is still there. So, did you not lose business as a result of the hurricane? Well, yeah, because the hurricane caused the governor to shut down and declare a state of emergency. So even though your building is still there, but for the hurricane causing the governor to do that, you would still be rocking and rolling. And
what I'm hearing here is, what I'm hearing, Jim, in the summarization there is, get a lawyer. But call us.
Yeah, I could talk for hours on this stuff about how every scenario is different. And no, but what the key important thing about that is, and Lee, you're absolutely correct, is that most people need to realize, just big picture, that there is a 5-year statute of limitations to challenge what your insurance company paid you. I am litigating Hurricane Irma claims. In fact, settled one yesterday for $80,000 more than what they initially got paid. And there was a lady who looked at her check for $5,000 and said, I think my roof costs more than that. I said, well, we're within the 5-year period. Let's challenge it. And the insurance company said, well, here's 80 grand. And to address the one question briefly, what is the percentage that you must pay an attorney? Florida statute 627.428 states that if you challenge your own insurance company, you don't pay your lawyer a percentage. I get to bill the insurance company separately. So when I negotiate a claim, it goes like this. Mr. Pearlman needs $10,000. I put 3 hours of work in. My fees and costs are $1,500. If we settle today, great. 6 months from now, Mr. Pearlman still needs $10,000. Now my fees and costs are $35,000. And if you don't like what my fees and costs are, let's go to the courthouse and talk to the judge and do a fee hearing.
So Jim, that's a fantastic point. And this isn't even contingent, right? You know, I love those car accident commercials, right? Like, we don't get paid unless we went. That's the law. Obviously, you know, it's a contingent. Right. This is different than even that. It's not even a percentage of your settlement. The insurance company is responsible for paying us for our time, correct?
Correct. If we can show that they operated in bad faith, and which was a completely different term of bad faith, but if we can show that they were wrong, that they either outright denied the claim improperly or that they underpaid the claim by $1, then we petition the court separately for our fees and costs. Now, practically speaking, how that works is the insurance company will call, and once you show them, hey, it's a factual issue, I'm going to get in front of a jury of 6 people who probably were quarantined during COVID, who probably own businesses, and they're going to probably think, why didn't I get my business interruption coverage? Most insurance companies, I believe, if you get past the first hurdle of showing it's covered, are going to say, okay, let's now settle. And
I'm sorry, keep going.
And that's where it's important to have someone like Mel to say, well, what are your actual damages? Because what's important to note is that as lawyers, we have to relay every single offer that comes across the table. So you guys do it on a daily basis where they offer you a lowball settlement. You call your client, hey, they're offering you $5. I highly recommend you say no, but I anticipate that that's going to be the discussion that happens a lot. Now, if the other side says, well, we agree it's covered, but we think your business was not suffering. We think your business was suffering as a result of something else. That's when you bring in the forensic accountant. And then that's where, as the attorney, I pay the forensic accountant. And then later, when I prevail in court, I go to the judge and say, I paid Mel X. I had 100 hours worth of time. And you know what? My client's not paying me a dime. I'm getting it directly from the insurance company. So whenever I settle a case, I get 2 checks from the insurance company. One for what's called indemnity, meaning what you're entitled to as the business owner, and one for fees and cost.
Okay. So fantastic answer to that. I want to jump to Chris. We've got a few really good questions in, but I want to kind of finalize 2 things. Finally, I want Chris to give me an overview approach to what we think strategically is going to happen moving forward with legislature, with timelines, things of that nature. You know, Chris has always been the smarter one in our law firm, and I think he's got a really good grasp on that. Then I want to go back briefly with KellyAnn and Jim. I want to touch on bad faith, and then we're going to answer a few questions, some very good questions that have come in. And then I want to touch briefly upon other types of insurance claim cases like car accident, personal injury type cases, and other things, and what we see happening now, just to kind of give that overview. So Chris, let's jump to you. Tell me how you see, we've talked a lot about the technicality of what's going on. What do you foresee? And again, we know you can't predict the future, but we can make some reasonable inferences. What do you think might be happening next as far as?
Sure. And let's kind of see what's already happened, right? So what's already happened, to KellyAnn's point, they're just going to continue to deny the claims for the foreseeable future. I'd be shocked to see any of these claims getting paid out unless there's a missing policy or some sort of technical defect. And that's for good reason, right? Because if you look and you read, I'm sure, I don't even know what those questions are, but I have a guess that some of the questions are going to be some of the questions that we've seen all over social media. Blanket statements like, Coverage is not going to apply because there's a virus exclusion. Well, the last 7 policies I looked at did not have a virus exclusion, okay? Or there needs to be property damage, and there's no property damage. But Jim did a great job of explaining exactly where we're going. We're already ready to go there. And Jim, following up with those cases, I mean, I've seen ammonia in a house, the smell of ammonia be a property damage by one court. Some guy was bubbling off meth in a house and the landlord kicked him out. And when the landlord went in there and he had to remediate it, it was a strong smell from whatever it is from cooking meth. That was found to be property damage. Electrical grids going down and it's cutting power to a restaurant. Food goes bad, restaurant's down for a bit. That was found to be property damage. So the questions are related. If you look at the big picture, the insurance company has done a good job of saying flatly a couple things. One, these claims, they don't apply. And so people believe that. And then less claims are brought. And so that's why we're doing this right now, to educate and say, listen, don't listen to that. We're lawyers. This is our job. This is what we do. Let us go get these claims paid, right? The other thing the insurance companies have done is, so they're getting people to not bring these claims, right? Now that we're educating, now these claims are going to be brought. At the same time, the insurance companies are telling you that there's no claim here. At the same time, they're all gathering together in Washington. The biggest insurance company heads are in Washington, and they're meeting with lawmakers and the powers that be in Washington saying, hey guys, there's going to be some big claims here. You need to go ahead and pony up some money for us. The federal government needs to create a fund for us to help us out. So don't listen to what insurance companies are saying to you, telling you the claims are going to be denied, because they're already on the back end getting money so that they can help pay these claims later.
Mel, is that shocking news to you?
No, I didn't need to be sitting down for that one.
Chris, go ahead. I'm sorry. I know Mel's feelings on this. Go on.
Yeah. So we know that's going to happen. We've seen legislation has been proposed, and I think it's 7 states right now where you have the lawmakers, the more liberal Democratic lawmakers, pitching in saying, you know what, we're going to create legislation that says insurance companies are going to need to pay these claims. Now, I don't think that's really going to happen. We've seen the legislation get started, but it's been stopped in a couple of states like New Jersey. I mean, that's kind of a big move for states to go back and retroactively kind of remake a contract between a policyholder and an insurance company. So I don't think that's actually going to play out, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is the pressure's there. I mean, the president is getting on and saying, you know what, unless there's a specific exclusion, these claims need to be paid, and businesses are at stake here. We know, Lee, you and I know, because we do a lot of consumer law, like the laws are always being made to screw consumers. Insurance companies like to screw consumers. It's easier to screw a consumer. Businesses are another deal because businesses have a lot of clout. When you put them together, there's a lot of clout there. The president himself has a ton of businesses, right? So we're seeing all of this going on at the same time. So I fully anticipate that there's going to be a way that these claims get settled, regardless of what the language is in many of these cases. And to KellyAnn's point, and this is important, we kind of brushed over this, each one of these claims really, we're talking about it as a big general thing because that's the best we can do right now. But these are contract claims. So each claim really is a case-by-case thing. It really is lawyers looking at big policies, figuring out what the specific language is, what's the specific exclusions in those policies, what's the specific argument that we're going to use on that specific policy. So we got to make sure that everyone understands that.
Chris, can I ask you, regardless of what may occur, do you agree, again, my strategy, and maybe I'm wrong or not, but do you agree they at least should initiate a preservation for their claim? At least say, hey, look, here's what's going on. Even though maybe they haven't had time to reach out to a lawyer, maybe they want to, but they're nervous. Should they at least try to preserve and say, hey, look, I've got this claim?
Yeah, 100%. Notice a claim, 100%. And what I've seen in some of these policies is really small windows to notify. I've seen them as low as 72 hours.
That's a real problem.
And I've seen 72 hours. I've seen 15 days. I've seen 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And I guess if somebody misses a deadline, I fully anticipate us lawyers will make the argument, well, when does the claim actually arise? Does it arise the first moment you start losing damage, or does it arise when, your damage is you get to the point where things are better or you're outside of that window. But we don't even need to worry about any of that right now. Better, I think, like Jim was saying, let's go ahead. Let's have our, everyone needs to go out there, file your notice of claims, bring it up, make sure it's in writing, get a claim number, as Jim said, gather up your documents so you can present, your damages. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We talk a lot with Mel, but that's, Mel helps us on the back end. Mel's our expert when we go to court, and his job is to get things ready for a jury or, for a judge. But for purposes of bringing the claim, just bring it, do what you can, gather up your damages, put on a little spreadsheet, put it together, make your claim, let it get denied, and then we go from there.
Two quick things. I agree with that statement. Mel is our expert. I would say to everyone who was watching this, though, reach out to your accountant or get one, because it is a really, really good idea, especially if you need to go full bore on this. You might as well have somebody start building this together. Call Mel, call somebody, call somebody who can help you with your numbers if you're not good at that, if you're not good with QuickBooks or something to that effect. I do want to chime in. Chris, you touched on something really important, date of loss. KellyAnn, Jim, either one of you two, jump in here on why does that matter? Chris talked about these very finite windows, which is a huge deal that needs to be addressed.
So based upon the research and a lot of the dates of loss that we've done with a lot of the homeowner policy claims that we've had over the past 7 years, making sure you properly document the claim to get it off the ground is one of the most important things you can do. If you are going to be going under civil authority, meaning that it's not necessarily your business, you can't prove, for example, that you actually had coronavirus in your establishment, so you had to wipe down the coronavirus, but 99% of the businesses are probably going to be using the civil authority part. Be aware that the general rule of thumb is that the business interruption starts 72 hours after that authority went through. Now, what does that mean practically for you? What it means is you need to have a lawyer like Lee, Chris, KellyAnn, and myself that know how to be able to argue statute of limitations, good faith, bad faith, timelines, things like that. But practically speaking, what it means is you need to be able, in whatever jurisdiction you're in, whether it's Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, wherever, to sit there and say, when did my business get shut down? When did the governor or when did the mayor, whoever, state that we're shut down? And then 72 hours after that, that's when the clock starts ticking. So, for example, client of mine submitted his claim on March 1st. It was premature. Now, he was doing it to be the right thing, to keep people safe. He saw it coming down the pipeline. I'm going to have him resubmit the claim saying, well, St. Patrick's Day was when, I guess in Pinellas County, they announced that everything was going to be safer at home. So 72 hours after St. Patrick's Day, submit the claim and state, that's when the clock starts ticking. The bigger picture is, even if you miss it by a day or two, it's all about making sure that you submit the claim now. Now meaning sometime before the end of April, because Chris and I and Lee can go back to a judge if it comes up and say, if they say, oh, it was early reported, we can go back and say, well, seriously, because the federal government said this, and this is what's been going on. And my client is not a trained insurance professional. My client's not an attorney. My client's a business owner trying to pay for his employees. So the main thing is just note that if you had previously submitted a claim, resubmit the claim or send it over to us, let us look at it, and we can assist you getting it off the ground and making sure everything is preserved, so that way we can handle all the legal work for you.
Guys, I have a quick question that I think was really good. It came from Jonathan Saunders. Couple questions. I just tuned into this Zoom, missed a lot. This is relevant to us. Would cancellations for our property management / vacation rentals company count as loss for upcoming reservations? We have documentation from most guests as to why COVID at this point, as to why they have shut down, which is COVID. At this point, they have lost $350,000 in reservations. What about lost real estate deals? Another 100K. There's a lot to unload there, and it really depends on, I guess, the policies. But just a general overview. KellyAnn or Jim or Chris.
Yeah, I got that call this morning. Former client of mine helped on a hurricane, has 14 rental properties in Florida, and asked me that exact same question. And the answer is, it depends, but yes, that is one of the reasons why earlier when we were talking about the documents to obtain, in addition to your P&L and tax statements, copies of any reservations. I think earlier in the program, before you tuned in, Jonathan, I had mentioned that if you were like a hotel and you had big conferences or you had something that was booked and then they had to cancel, that yes, that is something that we would submit as a claim as lost revenue, as a lost revenue is a component of the business interruption. So any documentation like a reservation.
Jim, right? Go call your broker, right? I mean, that's the first see if you have the insurance coverage. Because if you have the coverage, you very well might have a claim. Versus there's a lot of people that are renting their houses or just have 2 properties or 4 properties, and they're doing vacation rentals, Airbnb. A lot of the smaller people, because I've talked to a few of them, they don't have any coverage, and it's unfortunate because if they did, it very well might apply. So wouldn't you agree? Call your broker, get your policy.
Yeah, step 1, you have to have the policies.
But yeah, if you have the policy, Jim, can you see any reason why the analysis would be any different for these people than what we're talking about, right? What we've been talking about for the last hour.
No, it would not be. If your business is that you're a property management company and you have formed an LLC and you pay taxes and you have revenue and you can show under your policy that a cancellation was due to a covered loss, and the argument is that you had direct physical damage or loss. The argument is, well, loss, unless specifically defined, is loss of income, and you lost $350,000 and you have $100,000 in your policy. My argument would be they better pay the $100,000 or else they're going to be subject to bad faith.
Quickly, here, real quick answer to a question. Petra Justice, I'm late to the game. What's the statute of limitation on these claims? 5 years, as Jim said. Jonathan Saunders.
5 years. Well, 5 years once the claim gets denied. You have to report it, because unless it's 5 years for a breach of contract. So you got to make sure you report it now, but it's 5 years from the breach.
Okay. Jonathan Saunders, get your policy. Let's go with that. Paul Espinosa, we are going to post this video all over the place on our Facebook page, on the Jenkins Law Facebook page. We'll post that everywhere. Very briefly, I know it's hard to do this briefly. I want to talk about bad faith, just a nutshell. KellyAnn or Chris, hit me with some bad faith. Then we're going to move very quickly into what we see are going on with other insurance type of claims right now. And then we're going to call it a day because I don't want to drag everybody on too long. Hit it. Whoever wants to go.
So I'll hit bad faith, and KellyAnn, you want to hit fee shifting? Yeah, I think she said yeah. Sound good? So your insurance, you have an insurance policy. You're the insured. Your insurance company has a duty to deal with you in good faith. They have to be honest and reasonable. Yeah, there's going to be negotiations, but they have to do things in good faith. And if you have a valid claim, they need to pay your valid claim. And if they don't do that, then you potentially have a bad faith claim because they're not acting in good faith. Now in Florida, we have a policy for it. It goes something with first party stuff. You make your claim, the insurance company denies it. Then we have a statute that says we have to make a very specific thing where we tattletale on your insurance company to the Department of Financial Regulation. They have 60 days to cure their badness, basically to do the right thing. But if they don't, when we sue them for your claim, we're also going to sue them for a declaratory action, and we're going to sue them for bad faith as well. And that has the potential to open up your damages. So if, let's say that you have a $25,000 policy for your damages in your business interruption claim, and your insurance company denies it, and we've done everything right, and we tattletaled on them to the Department of Financial Regulation, and they still don't do the right thing, and we go forward and we get a judgment for you, then we can, under the bad faith claim, ask for all of the money of your damages, even if your damages are more than the $25,000. KellyAnn, you want to add to that and then kind of explain how fee shifting works? Because I think that's really important for everyone. I know Jim mentioned it earlier.
I'm going to see if Jim can jump in here, or Chris, if you want to continue. I'm having a little trouble hearing right
Jim?
now.
Windows open, buddy. Jump in.
Yeah, no worries. So again, as far as the attorney fee and shift, is that Florida law states if you challenge your own insurance company, you as a policyholder are entitled to have your reasonable attorney fees and costs paid by the insurer, because you should not have to pay a lawyer out of pocket to enforce your own contract. It's basically a way to put you on the level playing field of a multi-million-dollar company that's going to be paying more money to defend these claims than they should be outright paying them. there are court orders out there that state that we routinely can bill between $400 and $500 an hour. So when we are able to submit a regular breach of contract claim, what happens is we file the tattletale, or it's what's called a civil remedy notice, and we give them an opportunity to say, look, honor the contract or else sky's the limit. When we get what's called a final judgment, so meaning that we go to court and the jury comes back and says, we agree that the offer should not have been $0, but it's $1 or more, we get paid separately. And then as Chris stated, with bad faith, if we sue for bad faith, we can open it up and then the sky's the limit. So,
okay. So yeah, I think that's really important. That component, the bad faith, this is something that we are going to have to deal with as we move forward in litigation. And obviously after that initial claim is made by the small business, once we then move forward as attorneys representing a client, that's all going to come together. We cannot predict or guarantee something like that would ever happen right off the bat, but we anticipate there will be some bad faith claims that come out of this, especially on these summarial denials or these blanket memorandums from insurance companies saying, oh, well, you're excluded no matter what, thanks. That's not, we anticipate that's going to be a part of these claims. So is that a fair statement, guys?
Yeah.
yes.
I'll jump in briefly here. I think that's something we're seeing kind of right off the bat now, are just these blanket denials without even investigating it. So I think that's going to be a big issue right off the bat.
Yeah, I agree. Guys, I want to ask anybody, any last minute comments or anything they want to throw in. I did get one question, Mel, just very briefly. I think you touched on this. They had asked if they didn't have 2019, March of 2019, when they were trying to apply for their PPP, relating that to how we're going to have to make these business interruption claims. They don't need that, right?
You said March of, you said March of 2019.
Yeah, they started after that. So they didn't have any documents.
That's okay. That's okay. As long as they were operating, again, as by my estimation, on February 15th, when there was a federal disaster declaration, I think we're going to be okay. And there will be some compensation for businesses that are recently started or have not been in business for a full 3 years. I have two questions just for the panel as a non-attorney and small business owner myself. Two things that come to mind. First question is, does it matter to my claim whether I was deemed an essential or non-essential business and was able to stay open? What's that going to do to things? And then second question, the situation I gave earlier where I called my insurance broker and he kind of shut me down and said, no, you don't have anything. Does that constitute an official claim, or is there something more I would need to do, like call him back and do some paperwork? How does that work?
So the answer to the first question, no. Business interruption, unless specifically defined that you're essential versus not essential, which I don't see any policy that's going to state that, is not going to be relevant. It's going to be, was your business impacted? And yes or no. I think whether or not you're essential or non-essential is just going to go to the argument of, well, how much money did you lose? If you were non-essential, you lost more money than essential. You were able to do some business, but not as much. Regarding your claim, making it, I would not make it with the broker. There's a lot of, we could call it in the law, corporate shells of things where it gets not the right person. You would call your insurance company. It's usually an 800 number. You want to get a hold of a desk adjuster who actually works for that company.
That's a great point, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You want to get a hold of that person and you want to call them in and you want to say, I want to make a claim under my policy and you want to have your policy right in front of you. That's policy number this. I want to make a claim. My business was shut down 3 days after St. Patrick's Day or wherever you may be. And this is the date of loss and I've lost income and I want to report that. The person's then going to ask you a bunch of questions. And what's interesting, you're talking about fee shifting and burden shifting earlier, and I could teach an entire law school class on burden shifting. But what's important to note for purposes of this is that you don't have to explain or prove that COVID-19 exclusions, whatever. That's their job. They wrote the policy. If they're going to not pay you, it's the burden's on them to prove the exclusion. What you need to do is just sit there and say, I got shut down because the rest of the world got shut down and I've lost some money and here's my policy, and let them make a decision. So don't worry about if they ask you questions, because I've seen this on hurricane claims where it's bad faith off the get-go where they say, oh, well, is there more than 25% damage to the roof? And my client says, I'm 74 years old.
I'm a retired military guy. I'm not climbing on my roof. Isn't it your job to come out here? My job is just to tell you about it. So make sure you actually call the company, have your policy number in place, and say, I have lost income. As far as proving the numbers later, that's where I'll call you later and say, hey, Mel, I didn't know the exact numbers, but what we know is if you lose more than $1, yes. So when they deny you outright, that's when the clock starts ticking for bad faith and getting lawyers more involved.
Would you guys agree it's fundamentally important they get a claim number as soon as possible?
Yes. That's what I was going
to say. And Jim, that was a fantastic point. It's not necessarily about your broker, right? Go to your insurance, whether it's State Farm, Geico, Allstate, whoever, go directly to them, get a claim number. That is what allows us to lock in that potential bad faith. And at the very least, it gives us a point of contact to fight for you against the insurance.
Lee, just as a point of example, and this is why, I've kind of learned this by trial and error. People think of State Farm and people hear you're in good hands. Do you know how many State Farm insurance companies there are in the state of Florida? The answer is more than one. There is State Farm Fire and Casualty, State Farm Florida, State Farm this, State Farm that. So if you call if you call your State Farm broker, no, it's all rigged to make it as difficult as possible to pay out as little as much so they can buy Super Bowl commercials. Tower Hill is an insurance company in Gainesville. You know how many entities for Tower Hill there are? Tower Hill Select, Tower Hill Preferred, Tower Hill Omega. So that's why you have to call on your policy. There's a number that says to report a claim. You call that number because again, I've seen that come up in court later. They say, oh, well, grandma called the wrong, grandma called the wrong State Farm. I mean, they're already, and Chris said this earlier, and I can send you guys an email. I'm already getting emails on how to combat plaintiff lawsuits for COVID if you're an insurance company. They're already hosting seminars on it.
Of course they are.
So
screw you.
Yeah.
Look, phenomenal points, guys. And I think the real summation here is call us, call a lawyer quickly when you know you have this policy and you know there's going to be a fight. I promise you there'll be a fight. To everyone who's watching who's not a lawyer, let us help you. Let us protect you. Okay. At the end of the day, Jim, I also want to go back to your shameless plug to become a law school professor. Nicely done. That was well executed there. Quick question from Pao Espinosa. My business opened in August of 2018. Can't qualify, question mark. You can qualify. Go back and watch our video once this post. You absolutely can. It might have a compressed time or a lesser value to it for a lost wage component or a business interruption component, but you absolutely do qualify. You qualify if you open it up anytime, as they said, before the government shutdowns fully occurred.
Yeah, when we say 3 years of statements, it's just because it gives a guy like Mel a lot of data to work with, because some businesses can be very consistent with the income that they make month over month, but other businesses can have, they can fluctuate wildly. They can, if they sell big ticket items, for example, if you're a business that sells airline engines, I've seen that before, then you might make all your money in 1 month and then have 2 months you make very little money. So that's just best practice for you to gather up those documents so you can give them to a guy like Mel to do the thing that he needs to do. But it does not in any way bar your claim. If you had a business and it was open and then COVID hit and you've lost wages as a result, then you have this appropriate insurance, then you probably have a claim.
And guys, let me go ahead and just say this to everyone who's watching. You have questions, you have issues, you have very specific problems you want to address, email us, call us. You've got Jenkins Law, you've got Denmon Pearlman, you've got Mel Sams. Google any one of us, it'll come up. Mel, say your full name. It's Mel Sams, the fourth CPA. Is that
the name of the firm is Sams, the fourth CPA PA. We're located right outside of downtown Clearwater. You Google us, pops right up. And again, we can also help you start the process because again, I think it's key, like Jim said, you got to call in, you got to get that claim number. But at the same time, if your financials aren't in order, we're going to need to be proactive on the early stages of this because we don't want to get to the table and not have what we need, or you get a significantly lesser award because we couldn't prove what the real damages were. And I saw, again, going back to BP, I saw that a lot, and it was very disappointing. So, it's two-step approach there.
Yeah, and I'll add, Lee, don't you agree? We talk about this. We hate when we say things like, just call us, call a lawyer, like every commercial that we see. And so we try not to say that, but this is just one of those situations where these are contracts, and these contracts can be 20, 30, 40 pages, up to 600 pages. That's what all the attorneys here do, is we read these contracts so we can actually help in a way that a lot of people just don't have the training and the ability to.
Chris,
so that's
this
the
goes
first part.
directly to what you're saying. Of the insurance language folks, should we be looking for what should they be looking for in their policies? That's from Future Justice. Chris, I think that's exactly what you're saying right here, which is you need us to help you. You just need to make sure you have the business interruption policy in itself, correct?
Yeah, that's right. The first thing you're looking for is to see if you have that coverage. So you're looking in your policy to see if you have, it's often titled business interruption coverage or business loss income coverage. Look at your deck page, your certificate of insurance. It's often listed on there, sometimes on a checkbox. Sometimes it's just typed in at the bottom. So the first question is to see if you have the coverage. From there, there's certain general language that we see over and over, but every contract's different. And so when we say that we want to look at the contract, we're looking for exclusions, so we know if they're there or not, but we just want to figure out what's the lay of the land with that particular contract so that we know exactly how we're going to prosecute your claim and what the defenses are going to be on the other side.
Is there anything anyone else wants to share on this? I've got 2 more minutes left on other insurance policy type claims, but is there anything else anyone, Jim, KellyAnn?
Yeah, I want to chime in for a second that echoing what Chris said about, hey, just call a lawyer. One of the things that I'm really fortunate to have in my professional career, not only personal life, is having friends and working with other law firms on things. So for people, even though we're different practices, I've had the pleasure of being able to co-counsel cases with Denmon and Pearlman for years and being able to tackle big things. And this is probably going to be one of the biggest fights that's ever out there. So I just want people to know that the reason we got this group of people together is because not only do, we all have 3 separate businesses, but this is really a team allied approach to make sure that we hold insurance companies accountable. So whether you call Lee, myself, trust me, we're going to be talking back and forth to do the best thing for our clients. So I just want to let people know in case they say, well, do I call Lee? Do I call Mel? Do I call Chris? Doesn't matter. We will honestly do the best thing we can to take care of you. We already worked together on a lot of these other claims, and I honestly just want to make sure that people are protected, because what I've seen in other cases that people call me and say, wow, I wish I had known about this early on. So that's why we're doing things like this, and we'll continue to do things like this. And we'll make sure, if it's not posted already, that you have Lee's contact information, Mel's, myself, KellyAnn's, email, whatever. No question's too small. No claim is too small or too big. The issue is if they insured it, they need to pay for it.
Okay. Anything else from anybody before we kind of wrap this down a little bit?
Yeah, Jim's right. We expect one hell of a battle. This is going to be a battle, but we're excited about this. This is fun because these are small businesses. This is the backbone of our community. This is the backbone of Tampa Bay. And as we talked about, there just isn't enough government money that's going to come and help the vast majority of these businesses. So we can make a difference. So we're excited about doing this because we're helping small businesses, our neighbors that need help.
All right, guys. One brief summarization. Step 1 here, make sure you have the insurance interruption or business interruption policy component. That's step 1. Everything else will depend. That's the answer, unfortunately. But we think we're going to have a fight for everybody if you have that policy. We don't care if they deny you. Call us. We will go to war on it. That's I guess, the overall approach to this right now. Secondly, other insurance policy claims that are going on. Car accidents.
Well, and Lee, to add to that, notice your claim.
Absolutely, notice your claim. Other insurance components we've seen right now. This is just very briefly. Car accidents in particular. We have close to 400 open car accident claims right now that we're dealing with. I can tell you on the newer accidents, the insurance companies across the board are offering far less than they did before the COVID-19 government shutdowns. And the reason is they know everybody is desperate for money. Our advice, do not accept a low offer because, again, going back to the bad faith we've talked about already, going back to the value of your case and what it should be paid out for, please be aware of this. This is just to everybody out there who's practicing in the field and to anybody who might have these claims. Jim and KellyAnn, I have a hunch you see similar things right now. Because of the economic downturn we're going to be dealing with, we're going to see this predatory attempt to settle cases. Don't do it. That's our advice to you. Please talk to us. Please talk to attorneys before you make those calls. Okay. Does anyone disagree with that statement?
I would say generally you're correct, especially with the insurance companies that do a ton of auto. That makes up a big portion of what they do. We're seeing a lot with claims, but definitely we see it there. Yeah, uninsured motorist claims. Some of the companies that auto is not their biggest thing, maybe first party stuff is where they make their bread and butter, things like house, fire, and stuff like this. We're actually seeing some of those companies are willing to come to the table and actually reaching out to us and willing to settle claims for fair value. So it's not uniform across the board, but definitely it's the companies that do mostly auto, and it's definitely getting worse and worse. So we're definitely seeing more and more of the hard line stance in these claims. And we just ask you to do, the way we look at claims, at least in our firm, I know Jim and KellyAnn's firm is the same way. We're not trying to settle claims today to get paid today. We're trying to make money for our clients and for our firm. We're doing it for our bank account 15 years from now, not 15 days from now. We want you guys to think the same way. Don't take a lowball offer. Don't do something for your bank account 15 days from now. Let us, or if you have other attorneys, let your attorneys guide the ship and do it to make sure you get the max value for your claim, because you only get one bite at this apple.
Guys, this has been awesome. I'm actually, I've learned a lot myself right now. Jim and KellyAnn, thank you. I mean, your knowledge base has been terrific. I really appreciate it. Mel, you are always have been and always will be my North Star when it comes to any financial and accounting issues. Thank you for being in here to help contribute. Chris, as always, my partner in crime, literally. Thank you. I mean, you all did a fantastic job of giving information. We're going to make this available everywhere we can. I promise we're going to blast this because we think just this is so important for everyone to know and understand from that small business owner perspective where you've never dealt with this before and it's scary. We're going to help you. Okay. So thank you, everyone who's joined us. I hope everyone has a great day and stay safe out there. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Oh, one last time, Jim and KellyAnn Jenkins with Jenkins Law, call them. Mel Sams with Sams, the 4th CPA, PA, call him. He's amazing. Call Denmon Pearlman. We will do everything we can for you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.